Hey everybody, I am Alex Cohen.
And I'm Sara Sadhwani.
And we are reunited once again for this latest installment of the Inside the Issues podcast. So much to talk about. The truth is out there. I feel like we should cue the X-Files. Yes, we're going to talk about aliens today, and I'm so excited. And that's not all.
And that is not all. But what show would be complete without a conversation about aliens?
Of course.
It's also the hot labor summer. It continues here in Los Angeles with strikers all over the city. We're going to break it all down.
Yes, and disruptors. We are seeing them all over the place. Sara and I almost weren't able to tape this night because disruptors on the 110 freeway. So we're going to be diving into all of this and then some. But let's start off by talking about aliens. And I'm talking about not the really unpleasant way of referring to immigrants. I'm talking about like things up there, out there in outer space. This week, the Subcommittee on National Security, the Border and Foreign Affairs held a hearing, and it is called Unidentified Anomalous Phenomena, Implications on National Security, Public Safety, and Government Transparency.
That's a mouthful.
It sure is a mouthful. And we're just going to say UAP from here on out, which basically means UFO, but we're not using UFO, which kind of just speaks to a lot of what happened at this conference. But just to set it up, Sara, do you remember when Bill Hader was on Saturday Night Live and he would play Stefan?
Yes.
This week's Hot Club is, okay, so this week's Hot Club is UAP. It's got Jamie Raskin in a do-rag. It's got non-human biological remains. It's got whistleblowers under the threats of death. And I'm saying this all like this is like those were all actual things that happened at this roughly 2-hour-long hearing. It was some of the most extraordinary political viewing that I have had in some time. And the Democratic lead on all of this, of course, was Long Beach's very own Robert Garcia. And Sara, you and I, we both have big feelings about this being something that Robert Garcia is taking on. Your take?
Yeah, I mean, well, first of all, I think it's just fascinating that we're talking about UFOs in Congress, right? Like, this is interesting, and it's interesting.
UAPs, but
well, UFOs or UAPs, right? I mean, there's like this rebranding going on, because if you say UFO, it just sounds like you're talking about a sci-fi movie, and no one's going to take it seriously. So it's fascinating to me that we are changing the name here, and now they're UAPs. I mean, it's really interesting. Robert Garcia, of course, he's been on the show and on the podcast in the past.
He has.
And he seems to be the it guy for all things fascinating and popular in the world, right? He also is just coming out of Comic-Con, in which he launched a bipartisan congressional caucus for the popular arts, because he has this love of comic books. He is also seen as the key defender of drag queens.
Yeah.
And so it's just kind of this fascinating place that he seems to be putting himself, taking on all of these sort of pop culture-y kinds of issues.
And I think this is kind of perfect casting for this.
Yeah.
He made it very clear. He was tweeting a lot leading up to this, and we certainly saw that today. Everybody might think that this is so like California kooky, you guys and your like flying
your
saucers
UFOs.
and little green men. But he really repeated over and over again, this is a real national security concern, because over and over again, what was fascinating to me, the guys who were testifying today were not like guys with aluminum foil hats, right, on their ham radios.
Right. They seemed
These
like
were guys,
serious folks.
Dudes who had been in the military, had been pilots, were like, I am the last one to believe in UFOs or aliens, but I was flying. Right. I saw this. Here's what happened. And when I tried to speak up about it, the government shut me down so quick. And why would they be shutting me down if there wasn't something there that they're hiding? So, I think in Robert Garcia's mind, this is almost like, I don't know, man, some like big Oscar-winning movie about the government's cover-up of what's been going on here. Yeah. But he brought a real gravitas to it. I want to take a look. This is what he said at the outset of the meeting, where he was saying, I almost felt like it was a teacher talking during a sex ed class. Like, we're going to be saying the words. We're going to be saying penis and vagina. I said it, and we could be giggly and tittery about it because whatever.
As I am right now.
As you are right now, as we all are, right? Or we could actually realize, like, there's a serious conversation to be had here, too. So let's take a look at what Robert Garcia had to say as this meeting started out.
My career and training as a longtime and career educator and teacher and researcher tell me that we should never rule anything out. We know that our space, of course, is vast and undiscovered. We should come to this hearing with an open mind, and we should not let our existing ideas restrict us on either side. I hear over and over from many agencies the stigma around reporting and investigating UAPs prevents us from getting real answers.
So I almost think that Robert Garcia is the perfect person to talk about this because, yes, he's got his foot in that pop culture world, but he's also, he was an educator, right? He's a congressperson. And I think if anyone's going to be able to sell this, right, get people to take it seriously, maybe he might be the guy.
And I think he's proving that he can walk the line between these thorny issues that could be seen, by some as kind of wild or kooky, as you said, and yet at the same time, really bringing this level of seriousness. One of the people testifying today talked about how these UAP sightings among both commercial and military pilots are, quote, routine and, quote, grossly underreported, largely because there's all this stigma and people have this fear of what people are going to say about someone if they say, there's an unidentified object out there and we don't know what it was.
Yeah, and maybe there are some bigger political themes here too. Just two more things I'd like to throw out there. One is that he was saying that this is really an opportunity for some bipartisan cooperation, which Lord knows we really don't see around much anymore here on planet Earth. But one of the, when we see our country come together, Democrats, Republicans, everyone, it's like look back at 9/11, right? Yeah. We came together because there was this external threat. And who knows? I don't know if there are other life forms out there. I don't know if they have malintent for us or what. But if they do, this is an opportunity for us all. This is maybe the one thing we can agree upon. I would also say, maybe some of the stigma around it is it's one of those things that is just so outside of anything we've ever thought of before that's why there's all this stigma. Same could be said of LGBTQ plus community, right? And look at the conversation around gender and sexuality and how that's evolved. Changed, and that there wasn't even so many of the gender identities that you can have on Facebook these days. I think there's upwards of 50 of them. They didn't exist, even a decade ago. Right. So maybe this is the next frontier of that. And if we can learn to accept all of us human beings in all the forms we come in, maybe we can accept life forms from some other planet as well. I might be sounding totally kooky. I feel that way even as I say this. But
you're such a Californian.
I am, man. I watched that meeting from start to finish. I cannot wait to see what happens next. Yeah. But we should start talking about some stuff that we know is happening for sure, including an update on the potential of a UPS strike.
Yeah, exactly. It seems like UPS is planning to avoid a strike. But meanwhile, we also know that SAG-AFTRA and the Writers Guild continues on. Of course, last week we saw the trees being cut right around protesters and the fallout from that. So we see that this is all continuing.
Still hot labor summer.
A hot labor summer.
For sure. I'm curious. I've been thinking about it a lot. There was a really great episode of The Daily about the Great Resignation. And the basic takeaway there was that the Great Resignation is over, right? During COVID, people thought, I can quit my job, no big deal, right? And maybe they shuffled through a couple different jobs. And now people are kind of realizing, it costs so much just to buy a sandwich these days. Housing's expensive. I better hold on to the job that I have. So maybe the quiet quitting and the Great Resignation stuff is over. But what remains out of all of that, I think, this is my take on it, is that this notion of I can actually stand up for what I want as a worker. There's some vestiges of that remains. And I think that's a big part of what we're seeing fuel this hot labor summer that we're in the midst of.
And while we're kind of billing this the hot labor summer, let's not forget that we had a strike within LAUSD earlier this year as well. So this is certainly something I would agree that workers are really standing up and saying, hey, we're not being paid living wages at this point. And we have this real concern, right, that robots are going to be taking over our jobs in some of these industries that we absolutely need to be accounting for, right? And this piece that you're mentioning really did a great job breaking down how industries have changed over the course of several decades and the impact that that's having in renegotiating these contracts.
Which brings us to our regular segment each week. We call it What's the Word? The word this week, believe. what do you believe in? And actually, I should have brought this up with like the truth is out there, X-Files, Robert Garcia, right? Do you believe or not in extra life forms? Sorry, I was so excited about that I forgot about our word.
I can feel your excitement.
But also, do you believe that you have the power to make the changes that you want to achieve with your employer? And certainly, the UPS folks thought they did. They were practicing strikes in case it came to that. It still needs to be ratified with the vote. One question I do wonder about there is they've promised some big wage increases for them. Who's going to pay for that, right? Is that going to then come back to, is UPS just going to suck it up and take less profits? Or is it then going to be passed along to all of us who've decided we don't want to go into stores anymore, and suddenly what seemed cheaper to buy online may not be anymore? That's something to think about.
That's right. Will Prime membership costs go up?
Yeah.
Who knows?
Gosh. Yeah. No, absolutely. And I mean, all of this, I think, goes back as well to this double feature strike in entertainment, which, of course, a lot about it is the actors believing that they have to make this their last stance because otherwise AI could come and take all of their jobs away. And this is one of of course, we only want you listening, subscribing, telling all your friends about this podcast. But if you were to listen to another one offline with Jon Favreau, so great. He talked to this incredible Wired magazine writer who was saying, some of the bigger pictures here to think about with our industry here in Southern California, the entertainment industry is, what happens when tech moves in, when Netflix and Apple move in as players, when they come from a model of like move quickly and break things, whereas like Hollywood, the old school structures of the studios and Paramount and Sony and Disney and whatnot, very old school model, which was move ploddingly, and movies take 17,000 years to get created. If these
changing that model.
If the tech companies believe this is how we now operate, what does that mean for the entire ecosystem?
Right. No, absolutely. And I mean, the tech component to this, I think, reigns so heavily in both of those strikes. Just today, 35 members of Congress from the California delegation sent a letter saying, hey, we want you guys to go back to the negotiating table. I think that effort's being led by Congressman Jimmy Gomez, really pushing, saying, hey, we need to come up with some solutions here. This is going to have long-term impacts on the economy. Constituents are also, of course, suffering, being out on the picket line rather than actually working. We need to find some solutions, and we need to find them fast.
And it's not just the impact on the economy. I believe that there is a potential impact, a real impact on our political ecosystem here in this country, right? I heard from a great friend of mine, a cinematographer, and I was like, okay, how long do you think this might go on? He's like, oh, my agent told me I won't be working until January. That's a long ways away. And if there's no new content, we're already seeing it. What's going to come up more and more? Reality TV. And we've already seen before in this country, some people believe, I don't know how much I believe in this, that the whole reason Donald Trump got elected, like where would he have been without The Apprentice and reality TV? And this whole notion, Sara, I remember very firmly, right after the 2016 election, I got this frantic call from a TV executive who I did not know all that well. She had put together this room full of people, and she was panicking. She felt personally responsible. Diehard Democrat, full supporter of Hillary Clinton. She said, I think I'm responsible for the election of Donald Trump. I'm like, well, I think that's a bit much. But she was one of the spearheads in the reality TV industry and for Survivor. And she said, I created Richard Hatch. For those who don't remember, he was like the original season 1 bad guy. And she was like, I showed the world that if you do bad things and you trample on other people, that you win in the end. And I fear that is, Donald Trump only embodies that, and that's how he got elected. Now, whether or not you believe all that, that is up to you. But I do think
that's definitely a culture shift, right? That has occurred, and then we get comfortable with these new quote-unquote celebrities that are reality TV stars, right?
And I think, the other thing I loved about this episode of Offline is that Jon Favreau's guest was saying, look, I could rattle off too. I think her example was like wildfires in New York, right? Like there's all sorts of data points out there that I as a news person can present to you. Are you going to absorb that? Are you going to care about that with me delivering that as a news anchor or someone, ABC News tweeting it out? Or if there is a compelling movie, I mean, look at Oppenheimer right now, right? Like how many people went out and read an Oppenheimer biography? How many many people saw that movie.
Right.
Narratives make a difference.
They sure do. They sure do.
Hotel workers strike. That's now in, I believe it's third wave right now.
Right.
And it's having some ripple effects, including on us. Sarah, what's going on there?
Yeah, so, of course, I'm a political scientist. We have our upcoming annual conference of the American Political Science Association coming up. We received a letter from Unite here asking us to cancel the meeting. It's been fascinating just to see. I'm not a part of the executive council of APSA, thank goodness. But folks are grappling with it, right? Because political scientists write about labor.
Yeah.
They say they care about labor, but it's not always clear exactly how that's going to come down. The Latino caucus of APSA has already said that we will not be crossing any picket lines. So we're waiting to hear more from APSA leadership about exactly what move they want to make. So our conference is coming up soon, and 61 hotels. We have over 10,000 people coming for this conference. Yeah.
Wow. I was also supposed to be moderating a panel at a different conference. It was also scheduled to be happening here. And the same thing, they just decided to postpone, at least for now, because it was slated to happen at one of these hotels where they're picketing. I had a chance to talk about this with Kurt Peterson, one of the co-heads of Unite here at Local 11. And they've had incredible success with this campaign. Like, you go to conferences, like this is conference season. A lot of folks want to come out here. The Bonaventure Hotel was the first and so far only hotel that's been able, at least at the time of this taping, to arrange some sort of a deal. So they've been able to get all of these. I think it was the Democratic Governors Association moved their conference from the Beverly Hilton to the Bonaventure. I don't know if there's stock to be had in the Bonaventure Hotel or who their owner even is. I'd buy that stock, right? Like, I don't know.
They're going to be doing well this month.
Absolutely. And I think that's a really fascinating strategy. You know, if you believe in the cause of the hotel workers, once again, we're actually seeing the ripple effects of this and people making big decisions based on this labor action. So
absolutely
fascinating.
Sure is.
Last but not least, things got a little intense at the LA County Board of Supervisors meeting this week.
I think, City Council has been off on their break. So
protesters got to go somewhere.
Yeah, folks got to go somewhere. And
yes.
Board of Supervisors, it was.
Yes. They were talking about a meeting about, there's been a lot of talks about juvenile hall and what to do with this in these problematic facilities. And protesters showed up. And I just think this is so fascinating because we have seen now for years protesters showing up at LA City Hall. Like you said, they're on vacation right now. Also, while you were away, Sarah, I had the opportunity to speak with newly elected LA City Council member for District 6, replacing Mary Martinez, Imelda Padilla. And when I was talking about her goals in this new role, one of the things I asked about, because, she brought, I think it was one of her nieces with her, and there are some really foul-mouthed protesters. So when she gave her short speech about, like, I'm happy to be your new member here, she said, like, I'm really sorry to my nieces for the incivility here. And I asked her about that, and she was like, yeah, this is kind of ridiculous. Let's take a look at what she had to say about wanting to bring a bit more decorum to City Hall.
I think we also need to step up and say we as a city, as a local jurisdiction, can also make rules related to certain words that maybe shouldn't be said. Because you can insult and be critical without necessarily using words that are, profanity. So be critical. I'm fine with, people in public comment being critical. Do it. It's free speech. But do you really need to have that many F-bombs? Yeah. I don't think you do. So I think it's very fair game that we can do something like a code of conduct so that we can make it more inviting for our young people to be engaged.
What do you believe here, Sarah? Because I got to say, this is one of those ones where I'm torn. I believe that the public has a right to speak out and to protest, and yet if things get so out of hand that any, body, be it the Board of Supervisors or City Council, can't get their jobs done. We've talked about this before. It's like, where do you draw the line?
Yeah, no, exactly. And I mean, there are First Amendment freedom of speech is a thing. And so you really, there's very little that you can do to change the tenor of what protesters want to say. If they want to come and scream 20 F-bombs, they're going to come and do that. And I think that City Council is doing what they can. There are what is known as time, place, manner restrictions on public comment. So ensuring that everyone has a chance to speak and that the meeting and business can get done. So that's why there's things like time limits and, people can be cut off from their, cut the mic and such things from those speakers. So, I also wish that the tenor was a little bit nicer and kinder. I'm just of that perspective in general. But at the same time, I understand why people are angry and that's likely going to continue. I think one of the really big differences, right, is when we're thinking about local politics, it's in people's backyard, right? Yeah. So it's relatively easy to go. I mean, it's never easy to take time out of your day and go to a meeting, but it's much easier to go to City Hall if you live in LA than flying up to Sacramento.
Absolutely.
So you tend not to see quite so much vitriol in Sacramento or, to some extent even in DC, except for the lawmakers themselves sometimes.
Yeah.
So I think that's one of the real unique differences that we see here at the local stage.
And finally, one more thing that we certainly saw a lot of protesters showing up at City Hall about was, of course, the biggest, probably, local politics story of our lifetimes, this leaked recording. Gil Cedillo, Kevin De Leon, Nuri Martinez, and
Ron Herrera.
And now there's reporting that's coming out, I believe, LA Magazine, the first to report, and LA Times picking up on this too, that they are looking at a former employee at the Federation of Labor, a longtime accountant. His wife, I guess, was an assistant to Mr. Herrera.
Correct.
Sarah, what do you think? What do you believe happened?
Spicy, right? I love that at the heart of all political scandals is a romance scandal, right? This is essentially what it sounds like. It sounds like from the reports that this employee recorded it because he wanted to see if his wife was being ill-treated or things were being said about her. The police came in and were investigating his computers and found that he had recording software on his computers that he tried to delete. So the whole thing is quite fascinating. It's a big question whether or not he was actually the one to post it on Reddit or if perhaps he shared it with someone and someone else posted it on Reddit. All the questions still remain, but certainly we're getting closer to having some knowledge about where this all came from.
Yeah, wouldn't it be fascinating if it was not necessarily politically motivated? If we thought it would have been a fascinating feature film before, it only gets more interested by the day. I don't know, folks, what do you think? If it were made into a movie, who should be cast as Nuri Martinez, Kevin De Leon, Gil Cedillo? Hit us up. Get in touch. Let us know what you think about this podcast. Please subscribe if you haven't already. Be sure to let your friends know. Get in touch with us via social media. Sarah is at
Sara Sadhwani.
I am at Alex Cohen in LA. We'll see you here next week. The Inside the Issues podcast is a Spectrum News One production. Hannah Kokish is our producer. Nathaniel Leathers is our editor. The executive in charge of production is Jeff Shore.